Author event. Ingrid Ricks, Hippie Boy.
As a kid, I hated my life and desperately wanted to escape it. I wanted to escape the suffocating religion and poverty at home. But more than anything, I wanted to escape my Mormon stepfather, who used his religious authority as a weapon to really abuse and oppress our family. And my dad lived on the road as a tool-selling vagabond. When I was growing up, he'd come home maybe once a month. He just was a big dreamer who always dreamed of striking it rich. And he really just was a roamer, roaming the country selling tools. And I would beg him when I was like 5 and 6, beg him to take me with, and he never did. But when this stepdad entered our life just before I was to turn 13, and things really went south at home, I finally got my wish. So that summer, the day after school got out, I flew to Texas and joined him on the road as a tool hustler. We spent 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, roaming the back roads of the Midwest, looking for prospects so we could hustle tools. And it was hot and it was sticky. I mean, we didn't have air conditioning, and we had these vinyl seats that would stick to my legs, but I loved it. I mean, my dad and I had only 2 rules. No eating breakfast until we had sold $100 worth of tools, and no quitting until we'd sold $500 worth of tools. That was it, the only rules. And I felt like I was his partner. And when we sold enough money to afford it, we would sleep in a Motel 6, and when we didn't, we would sleep in a rest area. It didn't matter. I felt free. And my dad really, after that, became my lifeline and escape. Things at home were just getting worse and worse. This stepdad would sit on our juice-stained couch in the living room with the Bible open on his legs every morning, quoting from the scriptures, saying, thou shalt obey thy father, or thou shalt obey thy husband. He implemented these rules where we couldn't speak unless spoken to, and he would do really, really psycho cruel things. I mean, one time he demanded that I call him father, and when I wouldn't do it, I mean, there was no way I was doing that, he actually pinned me to his bed with my mom's help and tried to cast Satan out of me. Another time I came home from school and my mom was away at work. He didn't work. I mean, he had a job when he married her as a motorcycle mechanic and lost it right after he moved in. I mean, he was a total worthless fraud from my perspective. But this day, I came into the house and I went to the back porch to do some laundry, and I saw 3 rabbit skins dripping from my mom's clothesline, dripping blood right by where our laundry was. And he made me believe that those 3 dead rabbits had been my sister's pet rabbits. He would just play these psychological games. I mean, one time I came home and he was hiding around the corner and grabbed me and pulled me into his room to hit me and show me who was boss. He terrified me. And again, my dad really just became my lifeline and my escape. I clung to our times together. Sometimes I would also join him at Christmas time, any break that I had. I even had this calendar in my locker with his face silk screened on it, and I would count the days. So that's how I survived the next few years. But my dad always called himself a creative financer. And the summer that I was 16, when I was with him, I think it was July 5th, we'd gotten up, it was 5 in the morning, and we were on our way to Wisconsin. We had just sold out of all of our tools, and we were on our way to meet up with a tool wholesaler to replenish our supply. And my dad was pulled over for speeding. And the next thing I knew, the highway patrolman was holding this gun to my dad's head and dragging him away from me. And that was the moment that changed my life. Because that was the moment that I realized that no one was going to save me. No one was going to save me but me. But it was that day, ultimately, that I realized that I had the power to save myself. So that was a story that I wanted to tell, needed to tell, told everybody I encountered. about and tried to write for years, but I just couldn't. I mean, there were several reasons. The first was that I did not want to hurt my parents. I love my mom and dad, and I mean, the things that had happened a long time ago, and I just didn't want to hurt them. I also didn't want people to think that I was attacking a religion, because this story was about abuse of power that could happen within any religion and anywhere where someone is in complete power. But it was also really, really emotional. So I would try to write it, but then I would just start crying, and then I would, close my computer and continue going on with my life. So that's what I did for quite a few years, writing a little bit and then tucking it away. And then I was diagnosed out of the blue with this eye disease. And it was in my quest to heal my eyesight, part of my need to control it and heal this eyesight, that I found myself in 2008 in San Francisco with this doctor who focuses on whole body health. And the first thing he said to me, he said, "Tell me about your childhood." And within minutes, I was sobbing, and I mean sobbing, to this guy that I had never met before. And he just said two really powerful things to me. He said, "Do you realize that you're carrying this huge negative energy charge inside of you over something that's happened all these years ago, and you're still giving that former stepdad and those circumstances your power?" Now that really bothered me, that as a 40-year-old woman, I was still continuing to give my power and circumstance to that little man who had taken so much of me as a teenager. But then he said, "If you don't think you're impacting your physical health, you're just crazy." Now, he was the one who started talking to me about epigenetics, about environmental factors, particularly stress and trauma, that can trigger disease genes. He also talked to me about this ACEs study. It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, where they had found, tracking people, I think over a 20-year period, they'd found that if you had, I think it was 4 more trauma markers that they'd identified as an adolescent, your chances of having a big health issue as an adult, I think, really skyrocketed. So I left there and I thought, well, I'm not going to lose my eyesight, and I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to write my book. So that gave me more impetus to get going on this book, and I started writing more and more, and I was finding my kind of voice and my power on the circumstances as I wrote it, but I still was struggling to give myself permission to really go for it. Because the thing is, I mean, my daughters were young at the time, and my husband was just starting his law career, and I, even though it was eating a hole inside of me, I was working as a marketing PR consultant at the time, occasionally doing my dream writing of journalism, but mostly I was doing marketing PR, and it was very lucrative but soul-sucking. But I just couldn't figure out, like, well, how was I going to give myself permission to just walk away from that? That seemed really selfish, not very smart, and I don't know. It's like, and then if I just go for this, I mean, there's no guarantees that anything's going to come from it, So I just, even though my husband kept saying, "No, we'll figure out a way, just go for it, do it," I really could not give myself that final permission to go after my dream. But everything changed Thanksgiving weekend 2009. My family and I had gone to stay in this cabin, and we got rained out, so we ended up in Olympia, Washington, this town in Washington, and we were walking down the street that Thanksgiving weekend looking for a place to have dinner, and my daughters, then 8 and 11, decided to do a parody of me as an old woman. Now, they swear that they did not practice this, but they both bent down, pretended like they were walking with a cane like an old woman, and in the crotchiest voice they could muster, they yelled in unison, my book, I have to finish my book." And then my daughters and husband burst out laughing, and I bit my lip to keep from crying. I was mortified because I thought, wow, that's what I'm putting into the universe. I have this thing that I want so much, this dream. I knew I had to write this book. I mean, I had even come up with the title for the book, Hippie Boy, which was my dad's nickname for me. I had come up with that title when I was in my 20s. I knew I wanted this more than anything. I wanted it so much it was eating a hole inside of me, but I wasn't going for it. And that's what I was teaching my daughters, that I had this dream, but that you don't go after your dreams. And I'm telling you, that was it. The next morning, I couldn't sleep all night. And the next morning, I woke up my husband early and said, let's go for coffee. And then I just said, I gotta go for it. And you know what he said? He said, I thought that would get you. It's almost like the three of them were in cahoots, even though, again, they swear that it was this spontaneous thing. But anyway, that's when that flip switched. And I'm telling you, nothing in my life changed. We still had these bills to pay. We still had these daughters, that were growing up, and we still had all this responsibility to juggle as parents and, driving an income. But I now had given myself permission to go for it. So instead of making excuses and all the reasons why I couldn't do it, I made a list of all the reasons I had to do this. And then once I made it a priority, everything shifted. It was a matter of making that decision. I started getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning instead of 6 o'clock. And even though it was hard at first, after a couple of weeks, that hour became such prolific writing time for me. I was getting a lot done. Then I looked at all of my client work and worked with my husband to figure out what we could cut back to the bare minimum to survive financially, so that I could write this book. So I would do my client work in the morning, and then in the afternoons, I would go to a coffee shop to keep working on this book. And that book that I had tried to write for 10 years was done in 6 months. Now, here's the thing. I just knew that I had to write that book, And I thought, well, maybe if I write that book, who knows, maybe I'll start writing other books. But I could not have possibly seen what would unfold for me when I finally gave myself permission to walk through that gate and go down that unknown path. Shortly after that book was published, I was invited to team with this teacher at that alternative high school to use my book to help our students find their voice and power. And that turned into working with thousands of students to help them find their voice and power. It turned into 7 anthologies. Then it turned into me taking my writing through or healing through writing program online to educators, and then teaching workshops to people of all ages, helping people of every age find their voice and power. It's led to me being here now, talking with all of you. Some days now, keep in mind again, I felt like a piece of me was dying when I was doing that marketing PR work. Now, every day, I want to pinch myself. It is like magic. I am doing work now that I dreamed about. I get to write books. I get to help other people write their books. I get to help people find their voice and power by writing their stories. I get to help people tap into the power of stories to foster healing, awareness, empathy, and change. So this is what I want to say to you. I don't care what your dream is. Give yourself permission to go after your dream. And just trust that if you walk through that gate and allow yourself to walk down that path, remarkable things are going to open up. It's just this one big, incredible journey. I can tell you though, so many amazing things have happened since getting Hippie Boy out in the world. Like I said, this shift in my work, but it's also healed my relationship with my mom, because the thing is that she and I had a really difficult time talking about those rocky years when she was married to that stepdad. I recognized as an adult that she was a battered woman just trying to survive herself, but we were both carrying around so much pain, and I had so much pain inside, and we just couldn't talk about it. But through that book, she was able to read the story when she was ready, and we were able to heal. But here's the really maybe the most magical thing of all that's happened. About 6 months after Hippie Boy was published, it was Mother's Day, and my daughter Sydney gave me this card. And on the front was a picture of Wonder Woman. And inside she'd written these words: "Thank you for teaching me to go after my dreams by going after yours."